Thank you for listening today on Revealing Wholeness, sponsored by Infinity Whole Health. Check out our website at infinityWholeHealth.com, where we are revealing the eternal in each individual, the infinite in the individual. The creativity is made manifest. Limitation is let go. Now, here's your host, Dr. Troy Munson.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Troy Munson. I get a lot of clients in that have animals that, don't feel good, or they have something wrong, or they have a leg that doesn't work, or I've got a horse that is tying up. I've had a lot of clients over the years ask me to adjust animals, and I've taken animal adjusting seminars. They're not very difficult. It's pretty easy to extrapolate from a human to an animal. And the fun thing and things that we were just talking about is asking the question, well, how do you even know that an animal needs to be adjusted? I mean, let's just start with the obvious. Now, interestingly enough, the number one symptom of a cat needing an adjustment is that they're pulling out their fur. They'll do that. And cats are interesting because they're often what we call our one-hit wonders. They often only need one adjustment. Now, it's not to say that I haven't adjusted cats more than once, because I have 3 of them, and I just check them or adjust them, and they're just happy to have it done. But I'll get animals like a cat in that's pulling its hair out, that's literally chewing at its fur and pulling it out, and I'll adjust the animal, and they'll be good for a week or 2. And then all of a sudden, they'll be doing it again, and they needed a second adjustment. And usually by the second or third, they're often pretty good, unless, for some reason they have some weird fall. They just aren't able to right themselves onto their feet and the cat injures itself, or maybe gets attacked by a dog or something. That would be a scenario where we would see a much more concentrated course of care for that particular animal. But by and large, just most of the time, if cats get stressed out for whatever reason, you go on vacation and you come back and the cat's a wreck and they're pulling out their hair, they may have legitimately misaligned their vertebra because of the stress of you being gone, and now they just need to be reset, and all of a sudden they're golden again. So that's cat. Dogs are kind of different. Dogs are a bit more like humans, where they have all kinds of symptoms, all kinds of weird things. Whether they're growing a tumor, whether they're limping around, they're constantly biting or scratching, things of that nature. I'll adjust animals. Like, it's been kind of the wildest thing where you have an animal brought in that has no ability to stand up on its hindquarters, and after one adjustment, it literally runs. It looks like a miracle. It looks like a trick, but it's really fascinating. Now, I will tell you that if it's an older animal over the age of about 12, it's not so miraculous. But you may find that, hey, if you have an older dog that's legs aren't doing so well, you may find chiropractic, give it another 6 months, a year of life. But if we can address the animal early on, we'll find that we will be able to help not have those later age disease conditions like hip dysplasia come about. Now, to give you a quick story, one of my mentors, I believe an animal orthopedic surgeon up in Seattle, he told us a story of 2 dogs, black Labradors, that were not supposed to mate because both of them have hip dysplasia. So they both had genetically had predisposition towards it. They ended up getting together, and they had 6 in the litter. At 6 months, the dog's nervous system is mostly developed, and so at 6 months is when we start adjusting dogs. Most animals, actually. It takes a little while for the nervous system to get developed. But when we checked them at 6 months, 3 of the dogs had already started to develop signs of hip dysplasia at 6 months of age. The other 3 seemed fine. Now, here's the kicker. We cleared, or rather adjusted, those 3 that were showing signs of hip dysplasia, and it probably took about 6 to 12 weeks of care and adjusting their spine, and they were good. There was no problem with them. Their hips were doing great. Everything was healing. Everything was good. Now, we followed all 6 animals. By age 2 and 3, the other ones that were not adjusted, they were already put down for hip dysplasia. They were too far gone. But the other 3 that were adjusted at 6 months of age, for about let's just call it 9 weeks of care, we'll hit the middle. They never did. And they were fine. So here we might think, well, but it's genetic. How could an adjustment really make a difference on that animal? And here's the kicker that people are starting to realize is that environment is definitely part of what happens to us, and that genetics are a player in that, but genetics is less than 2% of the effect of disease conditions that the body will generate, whether human or animal. What really is the big kicker is how the nervous system perceives the environment. So if the nervous system is clear and it now sees and is able to make those legs stay right where they're supposed to and strengthen muscles and make them strong and keep them strong and keep the legs and the joints and the hips right where they're supposed to be, they don't develop hip dysplasia. And so the natural thing out there that people are probably thinking at this moment, if you're listening to this, is, do you mean that my grandmother or my grandfather or myself wouldn't have to have a hip surgery or a hip replacement or a knee replacement if they were getting adjusted? The answer is likely, but they probably should have been adjusted most of their life. Now, I have clients that I've been seeing for a long, long time, and they notice that they perform very much better than their non-chiropractic counterparts. But with animals, it goes the same. And so I see a lot of cool things with dogs, big dogs, little dogs, everything from dogs being nervous and biting to now being calm. Dogs that can't walk on their hind quarters now can. I've had German Shepherds that were brought in with a little leash to a chest harness. They'll come in with a hind corner harness that has like a little handle on it. They literally carry the hindquarters of the dog in while the front of the dog is walking just fine. And I'll adjust them and they'll start walking on their legs. And after 2 or 3 visits, their legs are stronger and they're better. I've had a German Shepherd that's about 5 to 7 years of age. And within, like I say, 3 or 4 adjustments, they were walking on their hindquarters and didn't need that harness for their hindquarters anymore. Now, I saw that animal a couple more times for the same condition. And then when they hit about 13, it was ineffective. And so they end up having to put the animal down. But, think about it. This animal was 6, 7 years of age and got another 6 or 7 years of life. And so did the owner, got to be with that animal. That's huge with just a couple of adjustments. Now, a flip side, I had a Belgian, I think they just called him a Belgian, but I think they have a secondary name for this particular horse. It looks like a Clydesdale. It's an enormous horse. And this particular animal was in a 2-animal rig pulling a sled, and somehow it got sideways and this animal was on the downward side and the other animal landed on top of it. So it had been about 2 years and had been limping around. And I worked on that animal. I told the owner, I said, this is for my own fascination because I'm a bit skeptical on this one. I adjusted this horse probably a half a dozen times. Never got any better. They end up having to put the horse down. And so when an injury has been long enough where they've torn down a joint, we don't see real great results. But if we can get that animal in quickly, I'll see pretty good results. I had a colt one time take a header, and both the owner and I had no idea this horse was holding his head down. And the moment that I adjusted the very top vertebra of the neck, we call it atlas, the moment I adjusted it, his head, not quickly like a jerk, but literally went from this low position that we didn't even realize, and the horse raised up its head to a normal position and looked straight forward. Both the owner and I looked at each other and our mouths were open. We're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it was holding its head down. It couldn't lift its head up. And so we adjusted this animal, I think twice was all I needed to do, and the colt was perfectly fine. I had a mare one time, 34 years of age, older horse. And the owner was like, yeah, she's just not doing as well. And so the first time I approached the animal, it seemed just fine. And when I adjusted that atlas, that upper neck, she immediately was not pleased to be anywhere around me after that. So I was able to make a couple more adjustments, and that was all. The horse was just too antsy. She wouldn't come near me. And I said, you know what? This is much comfort as I have around this animal. Let's put it on hold. And then we adjusted a couple more of the horses at this particular barn. And then a week later, I came back and adjusted her again. This time I was able to make a full pass adjusting each vertebra. And that was all that she let me do that time. And then a week later, came back and I was able to make full 3 passes on this animal because we do instrument adjusting on animals. You just check each vertebra and we're looking for what we call reads or a skin flinch or a belly to drop, or in a dog, you might see them, they'll turn their head real fast and look at you like they want to bite you because they don't like what you just did because it was sore. We'll see little flinches like that, and that's a read. That means that's a pathologic reflex in an animal and that it was definitely a vertebra out of position. Anyways, made 3 passes on this horse this time. Third time I'd seen this animal. And so I think it was a guy, and this was years and years ago, put the animal in a corral and brought out the next animal, and I'm facing the corral, and the owner's facing me and the horse that they just brought out, and I watched this 34-year-old mare in this corral start to jump. She's just jumping around the corral, just prancing like around the corral, but just jumping incredibly high. And I looked over and I told the owner, I said, does she do that often? Because maybe that's why she's not doing so well. And I'll never forget it. He turned around and his mouth literally, if it could go any further open, it would have hit the ground. And he just stared at this animal, jumping out of joy and not having any pain and just jumping around this corral. And he goes, I have never seen her do that, ever. And we both marveled at it. We both watched as she just looked like she was in pure ecstasy that she felt so good. This 34-year-old male. It was the darndest thing I've ever witnessed. I think I'll remember it for my entire life. But it was fascinating. And so the cool thing is animals, you can't tell an animal, hey, this is going to make you feel better. There is no placebo effect on an animal. It doesn't exist. But I'll tell you what, I'll adjust dogs and they're very skittish the first couple times, but it is comical when they come in and they see me, they immediately run up to me and they just put their body against me. They're like, let's go, man. I want to be adjusted. Now cats, not so much, but I've adjusted a potbelly pig. I've adjusted a sheep that had a broken neck, we're pretty sure. Another sheep had landed on it. I think I've even done a podcast about it a while back. And it literally would bleat and its whole head and neck would like disappear in its shoulders. It was in so much pain. And I looked at it and I was very concerned about, what if I kill this animal? And the owner could see the look on my face and she goes, Doc, if you kill it, I'm going to eat it. You're just fine. And I started laughing and said, I can't argue with that. I said, let's go to work then. So I'd adjust this sheep, full-size sheep, big sheep. And boy, did it not like those first couple of visits. And within about 4 to 6 weeks, about the healing time of bone, it was bleeding normally and it looked good and looked fine. And, I said, I believe your sheep is good. I think we're done here. If something happens, you know where to find me. But again, so just some wild things that I've adjusted. I used to adjust a lot more dogs. Now I would say I probably adjust more horses than I do dogs. I've adjusted a couple race horses. Pretty interesting. Had a race horse that would tie up, they call it, when it would run and one half its body would not perform very well and it would really slow down and not do well. And after the first adjustment, it was good for like 3 days, which is the longest it had been without tying up. Adjusted a couple more times, it was fine. So really, really fascinating. Almost a scary animal to adjust. They are so high strung when you get close to a racehorse. My goodness, they are like less than 3% body fat. They look almost emaciated up close. It's just wild. They are just some fine-tuned athletes. It is incredible to see a racehorse that close. But so, that's kind of adjusting animals. Those are things that I'll see commonly with animals. So if you have any questions, if this kind of sparked your interest, you're more than welcome to give my office a call. We'll try to hook somebody up with you in your area to get adjusted. But if you have an animal that has a problem, we certainly are welcome to help you out with that. Until next time, I'm Dr. Troy Munson.
The information on Dr. Troy Munson's podcast is meant to educate the listener and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease.